Hi everyone, welcome back to a bit of Chiptune. We've got a couple new guests here this time too. We just keep growing. We've got billionai, we've got me, Cassidy, we've got 3x Blast, and we've got Tris. Hello. So we're into episode 3. Wow, we've gotten so far. And billionai is going to be talking about the more technical side of chiptune and is going to talk about the computer science realm. And later we're also going to talk with 3x Blast, who created a bunch of questions, but we'll get to that later. So how about you two introduce yourselves? Billionai, you can go first.
Okay. On the first podcast, you guys were talking about like the difference between chiptune and 8-bit music theory. And I wanted just to give like a little background of like what 8-bit means as music, you know? Like you guys were talking about like how a bit is a 1 and a 0, but that's not like the idea, the initial idea of a bit. It's just what it represents. A bit is a binary digit. It's like a digit in numbers that we usually use, like a 1, 2, 3. Except in binary, it can only go as high as 1, and then you need an extra digit to show what you mean. So if you're counting 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, and so on.
So you mean like stacking the bits basically? Like if you have another bit, then you have a total of 0, 1, 0, 1, 4. Is that what you're trying to say? Or are you trying to say something else?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think. Yeah, like picture when you're counting with decimal numbers, like you go 1, 2, 3 up until 9, and then you need an extra digit, and you get 10 times more numbers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with bits, it's the same, except you get 2 times more number, not 10. So if you have 3 digits in decimal, you have 100 numbers possible. If you have 3 digits in binary, you have 8 possible numbers.
Oh yeah, I took a kind of like a web design class once, and I learned about this. I also remember a lot about the 16-bit, and I learned very briefly how to like read it really quickly and convert them into each other, and that was a lot of fun.
Hexadecimal?
I've totally forgotten, hexadecimal. So maybe it was...
Yeah. It's really nice, but I think it's a little like too much math without like visuals or anything.
Yeah, that's fair.
Not too much related to music, so...
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it's related in this case to chiptune music, especially since the kind of like obsession over the internet over 8-bit that like otherwise you might, like some people would consider it 8-bit, and actually understanding the parameters of what 8-bit is can be considered important to some, I suppose.
Oh, yeah, I suppose, but, well, then it would merit like an hour or 2 hours talking about it, so...
Oh yeah. You said you did a lot of research and you got like a literal headache.
No, yeah, the headache part was a little later. This part is it's just the beginning of the computer science bit. But so like I wanted to say this because then you can see that like the bits can be used to represent any number. Just like they're just a different way to see it. And 8-bit music means that you every piece of data that you record for that music can have up to 8 bits. So like I said last time, 256 different values from 0 to 255.
And the reason for that is that it's like it's literally like an 8-digit number in binary, right?
Yes, exactly.
So it's 2 to the 8th power, I believe, is 256.
Yeah, that's exactly where I wanted to get. So happy I got there.
Woo!
And like I wanted to say, like you guys were confused also about like what this data means, which is kind of confusing. That's where I get my headache.
Mm-hmm.
So like the file to record a song it has like a lot of ones and zeros that are representing arbitrary stuff like tempo and sample rate and whatever. And I cannot explain that because I don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
But when we get to the music bits, like the music parts, it's actually the 8 bits that are representing one very simple thing. How high is the wave right now? So like it's the current position, and I would guess that 127 is like maximum on the positive side, and No, wait. 64 is the most, like the highest, and 192 is the lowest possible value for the wave that you're dealing with.
Interesting. So actually, like the waveform.
Oh yeah. So like for the very first computers, no, not the very first, but like when you had 3 voice channels and each one could make one waveform only, you only have to say like, okay, this one needs to be this high, that one needs to be that high, and the oscillator can only generate this variation in a very specific way, which is the waveform.
So, for clarification, when you say high, are you talking about volume or pitch?
When you're looking at the waveform, I forgot the word. Like if you're looking at it like a graph, like a sine wave or a saw wave,
Yeah.
the topmost bit, which is like one amplitude away from 0, that's what I mean high. It's not pitch and neither volume, I think.
So it's literally like the graph, like in time.
Yes, that's it. So every point is where in the graph this point is going, and the oscillator can only get to there in a very specific way, which is the waveform.
Wow, that's really
Oh.
cool.
Okay, I'm visualizing it now, thanks.
So like that's the really interesting bit that I think was missing last time, because like I think it's genius, because you say like, okay, go here, and then this guy can only go there this way,
Mm-hmm.
And which waveform does it is part of what represents the timbre of the instrument that you're going for.
Yeah.
So in the beginning of the file, that part that just I cannot explain how it does it. It defines that, okay, like the first, the fourth, the seventh, and so on, value will be for the first voice. The second, the fifth, and so on will be for the second voice, and the third, sixth, and ninth will be for the third voice. And that's part of what represents the pitch. That's one way to do it. But then stuff started to get complicated, and then you can like switch waveforms between voices. And so like there's some 8 bits that say, okay, switch to that waveform, and then the next 8 bits say, and using this waveform, get to that point.
A lot of data.
Yeah. Yeah, so like when you can switch between waveforms, you have to you have a much bigger file.
Okay, that makes sense. For the NES, because there are only like 3 different kinds of waveforms that you can get out of it, and they're all really simple, so that makes sense that you need a lot of data.
Yeah, but the NES, it's a tricky one because it can't switch voices.
Yeah, because the pulse wave, it's like square 12.5 and 25, I think, percent pulse.
I'm not sure about that, but I mean, like, the first voice can switch between waveforms.
So in addition to having the pulse, triangle, and noise, the pulse waves can... Oh, cool. Toby came through with some data. Yeah, so it's 12.5%, 25%, 50%, which is the square wave, and then 75%. And if I'm not mistaken, 25 and 75 sound the same to us, but they're actually like opposite phase?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Ooh, I'm kind of curious now. I mean, right after this, I'm totally gonna put 2 square waves that are in opposite phase and see if it just makes nothing.
It should. If you go for like LMMS and you go like there's a setting for every oscillator that determines the phase. I can't remember which is it. Oh, it's the last dial. It's phase detuning. If you set it to 90 degrees, it's gonna be in opposite phase. So use the oscillator 1 in 0, the oscillator 2 in 180, not 90, 180, and 3 without any volume, and you should get nothing.
Wow, that's cool.
Great way to create nothing.
I love math.
Yeah, there's another part that I wanted to mention. That's like another way to specify timbre is by the harmonics of the tune you're playing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So since you can only specify that it will be this high, you cannot say like which frequencies are playing. How can you say? How can you do that?
Sorry, I'm not quite understanding.
Like you can only say that in the graph it's going to be this high, or like every piece of data determines the height of the next point. But how can you make multiple frequencies at the same time if you can only say where it's going to be next?
My first thought would be like have multiple oscillators.
I guess there's also another way to simulate it by just like specifying the frequency, because when two frequencies are playing over each other, it just kind of creates one wave. So knowing how to incorporate those two waves into one wave in a bit in the graph would probably be the answer to that. At least my first thought.
Exactly.
Oh, nice.
So, like, if you wanted to simulate, for example, let's say that a guitar plays the frequency you want and the double frequency, but less intense. So you plot those two in a computer beforehand. You make the sum of those two waves, and you plot the points of that sum. You don't plot just like the frequencies.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, that's like touching on like Fourier transforms, right, and stuff like that.
Yes. Yep.
Oh
exactly.
man, that's like right out of my mathematical reach. Like I didn't do very well in those math classes.
Don't worry, I don't understand Fourier transforms either. I just use them.
All right, I got this wrong last time, so I'm just gonna ask: is it DCPM or DPCM?
DPCM.
Thank you. All right, so for DPCM, I'm sort of wondering now if that's how that works, because if
What's DPCM? Sorry, I forgot.
DPCM, what you do is you insert a sound file, a sound sample, and then it basically plays it back when you use it.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't always come out great, but
Yeah.
I'd imagine that if it really is just plotting a graph with these numbers, that's how you make like resonant frequencies in a computer, then I'd imagine that's how DPCM also works.
I think so, but like since we're dealing with frequencies, if you just like if you slow the frequency down, it's kind of like slowing the tempo down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So probably what he does is instead of changing the dots themselves, it adds dots in the middle, on the midpoints. You know, I guess I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, that would be a really specific question, which is why I hate to ask another one right after. But also last episode, I'm sorry you didn't get to hear this, but we were talking about the noise channels, and we were debating on, it might be different but depending on what system you're using, but we were talking about how you can have like a noise channel that's low and a noise channel that's high, but obviously since it's a noise channel, it still doesn't have a specific frequency. So Tris thought that it might be a filter, and I thought that it would be that the randomization wasn't totally random, and that like higher frequencies were more likely to be playing on the higher noise channel and lower on the lower channel. And I was wondering what you might think about that.
There's two ways of doing it. It depends on the system, like I said. But you could have a not so random number generator that generates a lot of high frequencies. But I don't think that's how random noise generator works. Because like you cannot generate, you don't work with frequencies, you work with points in a graph.
Yeah.
So it doesn't calculate a frequency to plot the point and then calculates another one. So what probably happens is it generates random points and applies a Fourier transform, pushes out those low frequencies and like transforms what's left in a waveform again.
That sort of does sound like
which
a
is
filter.
a whole lot of math.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, that's a filter.
So it's a math filter.
It's like a...
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I only really know how filters work on a very high level, like not the nitty gritty of it, so it's really interesting to like learn about it.
Yeah, 2 years ago I had to like manually implement a low pass or a high pass filter.
Oh my goodness.
Fun.
Yeah. that was really interesting. I learned a lot. So like there's one last thing that I wanted to talk about, then we can hand over to Harm Yen. And that's like how the NES and other computers generate sound and how that evolved over time. I kind of touched on it a little bit, but like the first ones, they were just so amazing. I feel like I need to share. And it's the first few consoles, they only managed to tell the CPU to make a beep sound or a boop or something. And then someone was smart enough to say, well, if since our processor can perform like literally 1 million things every second, if we take like 60 of those or if we take 400 of those and tell him to say beep every 400th of a second, we're having a G sound, kinda. And so, like, if we can calculate when to tell him to beep, back then the data was stored differently, but we calculate when it has to say beep, and then we can have, like, really interesting sounds, you know? Can have actual melodies.
So real music programming.
Yeah, but that was only one voice. And if you wanted to get really complicated, like 44,000 times a second, which is kind of what we have today, basically CPU is doing everything for the music and nothing for the game. You cannot tell it to play stuff like too often because you're just getting time off your game, you know? And so by the generation before NES, which I cannot remember which console it was, unfortunately, someone had decided that maybe we should have a CPU that's specific for handling sounds and something else to handle the game, you know? Someone decided to do that and put a couple of oscillators in. And that's when sound chips began. Okay, where was I?
You were talking about the earliest sound chips and like how they added oscillators.
Oh yeah, so like you have a CPU that's specific for sound design, and like it works with a different file and it checks like that oscillator should be in that spot right now, and then it like sends the messages, and then you can start adding more voices to it, which is where 3 voices, 5 voices started to come in. And then, just as a fun fact, about I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, I was searching online to see if I could like really get the nitty-gritty of how it works, out of curiosity more than everything. And I found this program that can emulate it, and I had to dig through the source code to see how it handles each bit of data.
That's like dedication.
Yeah. So if you guys ever want like more info on later generations, please send me an aspirin and we can talk about it. So that's basically what I had in mind for today. Anyone's confused about anything?
I think I'll have to listen to this episode at least 3 times to get everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably gonna get everything by the end of like editing this, because I just kind of like end up listening to things like at least 3 times before I'm like, all right, this is ready. Just because of the editing process. But I actually did, like, I made sure I asked questions, so I have a pretty okay understanding of all the things that you just said.
Okay. If anyone else want to ask questions, like, I left some space open for it.
Check if you're really paying attention.
Yeah, I guess the last thing, this is just oddly specific, so I don't know what you'd be able to say, because you don't use FamiTracker, but there's this thing on FamiTracker where you can change kind of like the tone of the noise, and it sounds a lot more beepy. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
It's periodic noise. That's all I know about it.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but FamiTracker was the program that I found, and I would dig through the source code. Because,
Oh, wow.
yeah, the source code is open, and man, it's huge. Like, I sidetracking a little bit. I'm making this project with a teacher, and he's simulating a CPU on the computer for so we can learn how CPUs work. And his code is not as big as one of the 15 files from FamiTracker.
Yeah, Toby Comey just mentioned OCC FamiTracker, yeah. We talked about it a little bit, and I believe the code is also open for that one, but it's developed by a different person.
So, but what periodic noise does? What sound does it generate?
You probably have to hear it. It's kind of hard to describe a sound.
Okay.
Oh, Toby Comey might be coming through with some more wisdom.
But it's like noise, but you can separate each different key. Like you can hear the difference between playing noise on C and playing noise on D, which is not really how actual noise really works. So they're doing something with it.
Yeah, it's pretty impossible to tune. I don't even bother tuning it. I just kind of use it to create more interesting percussion stuff.
Interesting. So it's kind of like if you had like the triple oscillator in LMMS generating white noise, but you still added like a sine wave or something, and you can tune that sine wave. Is that like it?
I don't know if that's it. I think none of us really have a
real
understanding of what it does too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe next time
if you
I'll
could-
research it a little bit.
Yeah, if you could give it a listen, and if you ever want to come over and talk again, you're always welcome. That goes for anybody.
I had a quick question about, so at this point in history that we were talking about, like, there's a sound chip and then like a CPU for actually running the game, but we also have to make sure that those two things are kind of synced, because it would be weird if there was like a difference in sound effects and what you're seeing and like inputting. So how did that work?
Okay, so like I was thinking more about like the general. Oh yeah, even for music, it's important.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna get into the nitty gritty of it, because that's literally what I was studying this semester on university. But there's like a track for sending information between multiple components of the same computer, and so like whenever you wanted sound to play on a game in a specific way, for example, like in Mario, when you jump, it's an action that you want a sound coming through. So you send a signal to the CPU using those 8 bits, and the CPU goes, oh, okay, so that's the sound I should play right now, and then it plays that. And since it's a sound effect, there's probably like an extra configuration that you put and says like, okay, mix those two, you know. So the music keeps playing as the sound effect keeps playing. And when like you change levels or you go underground or anything, there's probably some other signal that plays that goes into the sound CPU and says, okay, switch files completely, or either switch files or switch section of the file, depending on how big the memory was, and play this bit instead of what we're playing right now, you know?
So, Tris, I know that you're playing. What are you playing? The Pokemon game?
Oh, Pokemon Crystal.
In Pokemon Crystal, I was watching a Let's Play of you doing that, and I believe the music cuts out when you do like an attack. Is that true, or?
Yeah, yes, and then I was actually about to bring this up. So in the NES, I don't know exactly how it works, but I know that sound effects are also done by the same oscillators. So like in Mega Man, for example, like, you know, there's 3 channels that are tonal, right? You have your square wave and then your 2 pulse waves. One of the pulse waves cuts out whenever you shoot the Mega Blaster because it has that like pew pew sound.
Yeah, I guess that's another way to make it work. I probably was thinking more of like current systems where you can save state, do something else, and come back. But back then, probably it said something like, okay, cut out this voice channel and load that file. Like I said, getting into the nitty-gritty is hard. So maybe there's like a different file for every channel. Maybe there's, I don't know. It's really system dependent.
Yeah, I'm always amazed when I look at like the way things cut out in old games. I remember watching someone explaining a Mario speedrun, where someone was going through the Mario like at the fastest speed recorded, and they were going through all these hitboxes because of things like, oh, if there are enough hitboxes already on the screen, then that hitbox can't appear. So like all these like cool tricks.
Yeah, there's some really interesting limitations.
That's the cool side of old school stuff, because nowadays you have enough memory to not care and everything fits. Back then you had to say specifically that, okay, this bit of memory, this specific space with this address is going to store this information, and if I'm out of space, then well, I cannot store this information, and like that makes sense. There's another interesting like Mario speedrun fact. The timer for Bowser's last battle, the timer between like you hit him and then he's doing his animations or whatever, and then he's gonna attack you again. It's stored in the same space than one of the cloud's positions. So if you can get the cloud in the screen and write it to 00, you can reset Bowser's timer, because you're literally messing with the same space in memory.
Yeah, I always I kept seeing in the Let's Play that the person was going into these pipes and apparently appearing places where they weren't supposed to appear because of the position of the pipe based off of where they walked and moved the screen. It was like really crazy.
I think I've also seen that video.
Yeah, I actually have a little bit more insight in that one. Yeah. So I mean, it's similar to like the loading hitboxes. They I want to say it's like World 4-2, but it's like an underground level, and there's what do you call it? Like a beanstalk or like a vine that'll take you up to a cloud warp that takes you to World 8, and you're closer to the end of the game. But speedrunners, what they do is like they'll open that, but instead of taking the lengthy animation of Mario climbing the vine, they'll go and load another pipe that it'll take you to a different place, like another bonus level or something. But they'll only show enough of it so that like the game recognizes the pipe as a warp zone, but the place in memory that it points to is the cloud level with the other warp to the 8th world, and not where it's supposed to go. So it's like it's the same deal where it's like it's pointing to the wrong place in memory essentially, and they exploit that.
I've seen that video too. I think what it was is like depending on the exposition of where Mario is, one like warp destination is loaded. And so if you go in the pipe before it's actually really on screen, I think.
Yeah.
Like there was this like glitch they had to do where they like nudged Mario into a wall so his position was 20 pixels more to the right.
Exactly. Because normally he's centered,
Yeah.
but you have to manipulate it so that he's further to the right so that it loads the pipe before it loads the warp destination.
Wow. Okay, I can see why they did that. It's a really clever solution for a problem that today should never happen again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we're getting a little bit off topic, but I love speedruns and game facts and code and stuff. So.
Yeah, so like if you like this kind of speedrun, you should stop at about like maybe PlayStation 1 era, maybe just before it, because after that you don't have to specify the memory address anymore. There's a different program that handles it for you, and so it's much harder to manipulate memory this way.
Have you ever seen those like Mario 64 speedruns? Those are the craziest. Like,
yeah, those are really interesting.
like it's not even them playing the game; it's just them like glitching all over the.
I'll look into that someday.
Yeah, it's really fun because they do things where like they essentially manipulate like the in-game physics and just go flying because like they find a way to like. There's a cap on how fast you can move forward, but not on how fast you can move backwards. So, like, they managed to just, like, fling Mario backwards. It's really interesting.
Wow.
I remember seeing this video on, I think it was Half-Life, where they, or it was Portal. Either one of those two. And it's like players found a glitch where if you keep jumping forward, you keep getting more and more speed. So the way the developers fix that is by if you keep jumping, if you're above a certain speed cap in the positive numbers, they just keep subtracting speed from you. So if you keep jumping backwards, like you're going into the negative speed, like they keep subtracting speed from you, but it's already negative, so it keeps just getting bigger and bigger in the negative. So you're going really fast, but backwards.
At any point, did anyone start to like flash forward for some reason when doing this?
No, I don't think they could get the number small enough so that it wraps around.
Yeah, because I was gonna say that like in computer you can wrap the number around, but like if it's Portal or Half-Life, you'd probably have to get like a speed of -4 billion to do that.
Yeah. It's like in Civilization where like Gandhi has like the lowest possible value in aggression, and if you make him even more nice, he wraps around to maximum aggression.
Wow.
I like how they made that bug a feature in later games.
I love it when they do that.
Yeah, it's a bug or a feature, yes.
I always had a lot of fun with playing with Portal. Again, I didn't get through Portal 1 that much, but
Yeah, but Portal 2 is awesome.
Portal 2, I played a lot of that, and I always had so much fun trying to, like, beat the game in ways that weren't expected, because, like, they have a set way that you're supposed to solve every puzzle, but I was always try to, like, figure out a way, alright, how do I get here without pressing the button that they want me to press? Just because, like, I loved that game so much that I'd, like, play it a bunch of times.
I love this game so much that I want to break it.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. That I feel like that's a pretty good segue because Portal has some excellent music. It's very different from like chiptune, but
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, even
cool.
aside from the ending sequences, which are amazing, it has some really cool like electronic background music.
I really like how Portal changes the music depending on what you're doing. I think if you're on like the launch pads, a certain layer comes in, and it only comes in if you're like in the air and going a certain speed.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Really? I never noticed.
Yeah, and that even happens like when you're using portals, so it's not like a switch triggers that. It's like literally you just like flying in an arch, and then it goes like, beep, 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 beep. Like it sounds really good.
I love stuff like that in games.
Yeah. I was actually like this game that I'm developing. I'm trying to see if I can fit a kind of dynamic soundtrack to it.
Yeah. Did you ever see? I know that you're from the 8-Bit Theory. And did you ever see the 8-Bit Theory episode on Pikmin where he talks about how Pikmin just kind of like has all of the music playing all at once, but a lot of it's at just quiet, and then depending on what you're doing in the game, the volume of different tracks just like raises and falls. That was really cool.
I've watched that video. It's really cool, and it's what got me thinking into dynamic soundtracks. But my first idea was actually to make like 4 or 5 loops and have them intertwine based on RNG, not a fixed sequence. Then you can get the player to listen for hours before understanding that's just looping like a minute of music.
yeah.
I made something like that just as a test, where I had just a regular bass layer, a drum layer, and then a couple of melody layers, and I just turned those on and off randomly, like at each point, every I think 4 or 8 bars. It just randomly picked another melody to play, so it's not a set track. It just keeps changing randomly.
So that's basically what I had to talk about. Oh yeah, and like there's this fun fact that I don't know. I guess it's more widespread than I've realized, but like 8-bit music sounds really retro, but nowadays we have 16-bit music, and it sounds completely like, sometimes even like it's live music. So it's a really big difference.
Well, that's like several orders of magnitude, right? You have literally 16 digits. So
65,536.
Yeah, like that compared to 256 is like a massive difference.
Yes, it is.
I'm glad you brought that up because I have a little anecdote about that. My mom has some connections with a music industry guy, and he got us to access these like the top headphones that are being built right now, like the number 1 perfect headphones that exist on the market, or not even on the market today, that people just made, that wasn't meant to be sold. It was just meant to be like, oh, these are the best headphones that we can make in modern day. And I listened, and it kind of just sounded like normal music. Like it had a little bit better quality than like normal headphones, but there's definitely a point in bits that, and in sound design, where it just kind of doesn't matter. I can't notice it.
Possibly, but maybe that's because you were listening to 16-bit music, and if you were listening to 32-bit music, maybe it would make a difference.
Yeah, maybe. It was just interesting. Like, it was top-of-the-notch headphones, but, like, I would have had a very similar experience if I just used my own headphones. Which is just the little story that I wanted to tell.
It's kind of like, there's limits to human perception, right? Like, we kind of run at a certain clock cycle. Like,
Yes.
There's, like, after a certain point, we can't perceive things that are, like, that close in time.
Actually, we do,
Yeah.
but we hear it as a timbre, as a frequency instead of multiple things.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
those were the beats from the CPU. It was multiple beeps, but we were listening so fast we believe it was a frequency playing. But I guess like the problem with 16-bit music and going to 32 is that we don't have. It's not about the time, but about the difference in pitch that you'd get. Like you still go from like from -1 to 1. You just have like 65,536 more divisions.
Yeah.
So like it doesn't make any difference in a practical sense, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Not so much the frequency, but like how fine, how
Oh yeah, I get
how
it.
fine a point you can really look at into it.
Yeah, I'm really thinking about this actually. Like, there's definitely, we worked so hard to like get all these outputs and entertainment, but like, there's only so much that we can actually input in ourselves. That's strange to think about. Yeah, I guess then you get into like, what's it called? Like changing yourself.
Biomodifications,
Yeah,
whatever.
biomodifications and like that biomedical field. I guess that's the only way to bridge that gap. But then it gets like really complicated and weird. So it's strange to think about. Like,
I don't think it's worth it for like more high quality music.
no, definitely not. Although I did think I've been thinking a lot on the audiology standpoint, in which like, you know how we have hearing aids that allow us to hear different things. I always thought it'd be really cool if you had headphones that you could adjust in order to almost like change the music that you're listening to or whatever you're listening to like better perform for your particular ear. I always thought that would be an interesting thing to like look into.
Oh, the one last point that I wanted to touch on was regarding how like we were talking about how, you know, sometimes especially in older games the music would cut out and to make room for sound effects. I took a like music cognition and perception class, and we learned about this concept called masking, where like if you were to play a tone, like even just a single note or a melody, and you were to interrupt it with like noise. So if it was like da ch da ch, like our brain would perceive it as one long note, even if it wasn't. So I think that's like kind of interesting and a tool that like I've been trying to use in my own music, and I'm sure that, you know, game developers and composers and sound designers, especially back in the day during those with those limitations, made use.
Yeah,
of.
totally.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is in Pokemon Gold and Silver.
Mm-hmm.
So like when you go to the battle music, the Game Boy could only produce 3 waves at a time, but there's actually 5 voices playing almost. So they were like, that was an oscillator playing, and then they send like it plays for I don't know like one cycle for the CPU in a waveform, a specific tone. Then it goes in another cycle to a different waveform, a different note, and then it comes back. And it does that fast enough that you'll feel like it's 2 different oscillators, even though it's only one.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of what, like, I know, for example, Tris, I'm going to bring it back to Pokemon. I know that a lot of the Pokemon tracks, they use the triangle, and it's actually, like, playing 2 different notes side by side a lot. And it's definitely perceivable, but it definitely, like, they use that to give almost the illusion of a chord, from a musical technical standpoint, because you can really only play 3 notes, and you want a melody in there. So you switch the note over and over again to get a chord. That's something definitely that, if done really quickly, like we do in the OXX effect in FamiTracker, where it goes, I don't know how to explain it from. Do you know what that's called?
An ARP.
I have no idea what that's called, but like it's how you get multiple notes instead of a timbre in the oscillator.
Yeah, because in Chiptune has a lot of those things where it's playing all these different notes side by side rapidly, and then it sort of, you can use that to give the illusion of a chord.
Yeah, that would be like a really fast arpeggio.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's the word.
So you were saying like 16-bit music. I feel like a lot of people kind of confuse 16-bit music with SNES music, like just compressed samples. So I think when somebody says, "Oh, this is 8-bit, this is 16-bit," they mean like this isn't SNES, NES music. This is SNES music, but that's not really what 16-bit is about.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know that people do that, but that's an important distinction. Everything after 8-bit is 16-bit. Come on.
Yeah, I was just saying, like in FL Studio, the first option to export something in waveform is 16-bit, and I can't really tell the difference between a 16-bit exported song and a 24 or 32-bit exported song. It just sounds all good to me.
Do you want to take a short break and then go to 3x Blast's questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good.
I think that's about time to do
Time
that.
to save again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah, right.